Welcome to the Washdown podcast, episode number 45. And today we will be talking with military member Ray Jones. And we have a great conversation. We talk about mental health. We talk about spiritual health and spiritual warfare. So it is very enlightening, and Ray's a great guy, very knowledgeable. So I hope everybody gets something out of this. I hope you enjoy listening to it as much as we enjoyed making it. So sit back and enjoy episode number 45 of the Washdown podcast with guest Ray Jones.
Like, speaking of, when you talk about the biases, how much of those just come out of raw emotion? In, a critical incident, it instantly, we all talk about the 7 stages of grief, but how you work yourself through those, how those can implement your bias. For example, like if you... when it comes to the death of a loved one, you may instantly be mad at the paramedic on scene that pronounced the death or something like that. Or you may, instantly, if you were in the military, be mad that somebody wasn't watching somebody's back or didn't provide cover fire. So instantly it's his fault that they're dead. It's his fault that this person's injured. But that's that, personal bias that maybe go into it. So when you tell that story, it wasn't, the 50,000 cheeseburgers this guy ate for his career, his entire life that gave him the heart attack that killed him. It was the paramedic right there that said he didn't have a chance.
Right.
It wasn't the enemy shooting at you from across the field. It was the one motherfucker right there that didn't lay down the cover fire while we were trying to advance a position. So yeah, I really love that you bring up that point because, to me that was sitting right next to this person, or to me that was in that house when a family member was pronounced, it's completely on perspective.
So something unique when it comes to a bias, and this kind of gets really more into the psychology, because Valor was the tipping point for me of becoming this new person on this new journey. It opened up my eyes to something I never saw before, which was basically humanity. So the way that I like to look at it with people is if you take the periodic table of elements in science, which I don't like science. I could care less for chemistry. I don't need to know the composition of something with a nuclear and a protein. I really don't care, right? I really don't. There's people out there smart enough to figure that out. But the point is, it defines every single element in our world that has any composition and structure. But when you look at it from a humanist psychological point of view, and this is probably the most critical element on the world, which is the HU element for humanity, right? And while it's not exactly an element, from a humanist perspective it is. And when you look at how we bias things and process information, look at it from a human survivalist standpoint, right? So Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs says we need food, water, and shelter for our basic provisions of life, right? That's how we survive basic life. Mm-hmm. If we're fed, we're watered, and we're sheltered. And then we advance up that pyramid towards maybe self-actualization, which none of us will probably ever achieve. Like maybe Gandhi or Mother Teresa probably got the closest to that, right? The rest of us schmoes, we're going to hang out in the middle. We're just comfortable with our life, right?
Yeah.
But there's actually a level below food, water, and shelter, that basic level. And that's basically not wanting to die, right? We crave air. We crave life, every single human. And I'm only saying this because when it comes to our biases, as we advance in age biologically, as we become older, we become more aware, we become more experienced, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I don't want to be told that I'm wrong. I've been doing this my way for 10 years, 15, 20 years. I've learned the pros, I've learned the cons. It's not your place to tell me I'm wrong, even if maybe I know that I'm wrong, but I'm still going to use my own way because my pride gets in the way and my arrogance of you're not going to correct me, right?
Oh, you mean your ego?
Yeah, that little thing called ego, that 3-letter word that we all suffer from time to time, ego.
Not so perfect.
Yeah.
So the biasing comes back to that because I don't want you to tell me I'm wrong because I'm not.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. And then you're going to go look for reasons why you're not wrong, why you're right. And then that's whenever you get into confirmation bias, because you can get on the internet now because it's available to everyone and you can search anything.
Right.
And come up with reasons why you're right. You can also come up with a million reasons why you're wrong,
but we're not going to look those up.
But you're not going to look those up.
No.
Yeah.
I find it interesting. A really good friend of mine, a good mentor of mine, he said if you look at the age of humanity that we're in now, we have an overwhelming amount of access to data and information, right? But in the midst of all that, we've never been more starving for truth and wisdom than we ever have been. Because if you go backwards in time 100 years, 200 years, there was a limited amount of resources where you could gain truth and knowledge. You couldn't just control F your way through things, right?
Yeah.
You actually had to do this thing called reading.
Yeah.
Right? So you had to apply a critical level of cognitive thinking into what you were doing. Anymore these days, it's very easy just to Dr. Google everything for any ailment that you've got, and all of a sudden you're an expert because now you know what that 5-letter word means or 20-letter word means. But do you actually understand it, right? So we're drowning in information, but we're still trying to seek and crave wisdom. So that leads into all this stuff about mental health, which, you know, is something I'm very passionate for.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, Ray, thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it. And you making the long drive.
Yeah, you know, it's a reason to get in the bike.
Yeah.
On a really good day out in the weather. So it was good, yeah.
So why don't we start off before we kick into the hardcore mental health?
Yeah.
I'm still laughing though about the informational thing because I just saw the TikTok the other day.
And that's the problem with your generation.
Listen, it was like this guy. He's like, what if you went back in the 1800s? He's like, gather around, motherfuckers. He's like, I got all the information you need. Ask me a question. I'll tell you the truth. He's like, you know, what about this? I don't know that because y'all motherfuckers ain't got Google, but just give me some time and I'll figure it out. I was like, yep, that's it.
Yep. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Ray. Where you from?
So, born in Oklahoma, right here like it shows.
Mm-hmm.
Raised in Kansas. So I am deemed a shirt wearer by my family because I didn't attend the University of Oklahoma, but I cheer them on because my family did. They went to university. So
my ex-wife did, and I was the only one in the family that didn't, so I was kind of shunned.
Yeah, I'm a shirt wearer, as they say. I wear the Oklahoma shirt, right? So, yeah, I don't like, you know, if you go to a school, you get like the alumni shirt and the thing for the back of your car and all this stuff. Yeah, I just have all that stuff because I'm a fan. So,
well,
I'm not,
you know,
whatever.
Good enough, man. Good enough.
Whatever. So, yeah, so I'm married. My family lives in Kansas. Our jobs have us separated right now, so we're still working on that. But we have 2 young boys at home, 4 and 5 years old. So mama's busy, full-time work. I go home on the weekends, then I'm back here during the week. I've served in the military. I've got family that have as well in the Marines, so they call me a fly boy because they're Marines, you know. I mean, I'm a fly boy.
Yeah.
That's part of the chair force, right? So, yeah. But no,
well, you know, they don't hand out crayons as MREs to you guys.
No, they give us those icy pops.
Oh,
so they're actually chilled. So when we go somewhere, we actually get cold beverages and air conditioning. We don't get a hole in the ground, you know. A little bit more comforts of the creature comforts.
Yeah.
So
we're gonna have a buddy of mine that's a Marine on tomorrow. So
fun.
I'm thinking about going and getting some crayons and setting them on the
set
table
them right
for him.
there in the middle of the table for him.
Yeah.
Say we were thinking of you.
Yeah.
Gotta put them on a little platter though.
Arrange them color palette wise,
or even alphabetically to help him learn his alphabet, say ABC. It's not enough with the colors. Let's help you with your letters. You know that alphanumeric, the Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta? We're going to help you learn that a little better.
Oh.
You can even put those little things back here that are for like first graders, for like A is for apple. One of the ladies in our squadron did that a while back because she's trying to learn the phonetic alphabet because she didn't know it. So she hung up an A through Z like a first grader would, and she made them herself. And
hey, man, if
power to her.
You know what? Yeah. Some people learn differently. Some
Lowest
people,
common denominator.
Exactly. That's we won't get into that.
Yeah.
I made flashcards. When I started flying, I made flashcards because it's the same as the military. And I was like, I had just gotten kind of used to the law enforcement alphabet, and then I'm like, wait, what the hell is this? I learned it all over again. Flashcards.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess they work. Some people
6th grade instead of 1st grade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good enough.
Yeah. But really, as far as me, I've had a love for my country, love for my God, love for my family, and I've become aware of what we'll talk about later. But the driving force for me right now of where I've come to professionally and personally is understanding a battlefield that we walk on every single day. But most of us in our society, especially here in America, with the wonderful comforts that we have here in our nation. There's a battlefield we walk on that I believe most people don't even realize they're on every day. The one we think of more predominantly is the one that most people think of like in Iraq or Afghanistan, in the Middle East. But that gets more into what we'll talk about later about the multimodal sensory perceptions of things and why we can define things and have comforts in that. But other than that, I'm just happy to be here and investing what one mentor of mine shared with me. He challenged me one time. He's like, "Hey, Ray, what is the most valuable commodity on the earth?" And I'm thinking, well, I don't know, gold, rubber, ore, diamonds, bananas.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like,
Platinum.
I'm trying to think, and he says,
Boobs.
no, he said it's in another walk of life, maybe.
Yeah.
But he said, no, it's time. Because if you think about it, when you spend time, you never get it back. And when you have an abundance of it, most people call boredom, you have been given the world's most valuable commodity in abundance. And the real question comes down to, what are you going to do with it? Some people like to just, veg out, play video games, whatever. That's fine. There's a healthy way of using that. But when you have that time, how are you reinvesting it? Because the time that we have on this earth is a blink, right? So
Yeah. It's finite.
It's very finite, right? So I've been looking at a different perspective, a different lens, whatever analogy you want to throw at it, of things that I've learned and how I can just share that knowledge and just help people understand what we'll get to in a minute with the whole mental health piece and how those stigmas, fears, and perceptions that are a driving wedge on people seeking help, why they don't need to be there. But anyway, that's the quick background, down and dirty. So,
Nice.
yeah,
All right, man. Well, let's dive in.
send it. Which is the send it's a very popular phrase for cleared hot in from the west.
Yeah. Yeah.
Send it.
Yeah. I got you. I watch Andy Stump.
Yeah.
If you don't watch that podcast, then, well, you just are missing out.
But watch ours first.
Yeah. Obviously.
Yep.
It lead up to that one.
Yep.
Yeah.
The hierarchy of importance.
It's the hierarchy of needs. We're down here. He's closer to self-actualization than we are.
There you go. Yeah. We're still in the shelter phase.
Yeah. All right. So you mentioned, how you have a passion for mental health now.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Valor too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we met.
Yep.
We haven't talked a whole lot about Valor on the show. Just
Right.
kind of surface mentioned it or whatever.
Sure.
Trying to figure out how to phrase this without,
The phraseology.
Yeah,
of it.
the phraseology of it. So just share with us why you're passionate about mental health.
So my passion for mental health comes from something immeasurably powerful that I learned from it. As a prior combat airman that had served in the Air Force, there's this armor that I believe not just military members wear, but everybody wears every single day of life. We live in a society that tells us how we should dress, how we should act, the things we should buy, the things we should say. And when you go against that grain, you're perceived as different. And when something's different and misunderstood, usually there's ramifications that come from that. So, as a member of a very patriotic socio-subculture of our country, with military and patriotism, there's just a certain way that you carry yourself, just like a first responder. When you wear your uniform in public, there is something that you represent that is so much bigger than you. There's just this reverence, this just respect, right? Because of the things that your uniform says you represent. So with that same thought process, it also goes against the grain if you start talking about personal problems or issues or problems with your marriage or the issues you're having internally, whether you struggle with alcohol addiction or you go home and want to veg out on pornography for 3 hours, right? Those are the stigmas that if we feel like we can't talk about them, we compartmentalize them. We put them in those boxes under our beds or above our washers and dryers or wherever we put our stuff, right?
Yeah.
That nobody else can hear about. We figure, oh, I got this. I can take care of this on my own, on myself, right? Until we get to the point that space we compartmentalize our issues can't hold anymore. It becomes full. And now we don't know what to do because we're afraid that if we say we want to get help through a mental health program, we hear stories and perceptions of people who've lost their jobs. They've lost the ability for promotion. The group of people they may have hung out with don't want to hang out with them anymore, and we don't want to be outcasts. You know, as humans, we crave affection, not affliction. But we also live in this world where there's this macho egocentrism of, I'm a man, I don't cry, I don't talk about my emotions. You know, I've got a shotgun in my back window in my 4x4 truck and my dog, you know, like all these things that define what a man is. Mm-hmm. And I believe for men especially, that's a little bit more difficult to get that barrier brought down, just because you want to be seen as tough and intelligible and be able to provide for yourself and be emotionless, right? Which is wrong. We all have emotions. Men cry. Period. End of story. If you say you don't cry, you're lying, right? So we have emotions that stir us for a reason. But my passion for mental health is understanding, or is the new understanding that when I had gone through Valor, which is a unique inpatient psychiatric center, which, okay, I just said it, psych ward, right?
Yeah.
The proverbial psych ward straight jacket.
There's no rubber walls there.
No, there's not. No, it's something that is becoming less of a stigma. But my passion for mental health comes from understanding that it's just like, if you need to get physically fit, where do you go? You go to the gym. If you need to strengthen your social networking, what do? You join social network sites. You go to meet people, right? But if your spiritual strength is low, or your mental health isn't as strong as it needs to be, where do you go to get that help, right? You go to a place that helps you strengthen your mind, right? Because the most two powerful weapons in the human body is the mind and the heart. Because without those, it's basically emotion. What is it called? There's a phrase that another mentor of mine told me. It's mindless emotionalism, where you're just acting without thought of what you're doing. It's like a lack of care. So what happened after Valor is I learned something. The more that I shared my testimony about what I went through, the raw, nitty-gritty details about taking the proverbial knee, when the items and the attributes that led to mental health, something amazing happened. People, without me asking them, would give me their testimony. The raw, nitty-gritty details of their life that aren't at that superficial level of, what are your plans this weekend? How are the Chiefs doing?
Yeah.
Oh, what are your plans for the holidays? Because those conversations don't drive anything intellectual. They don't challenge us with adversities. They just give us the social comforts of that social pillar, right, to interact with another human being. But we don't really grow intrinsically from that. When we talk about the things we've struggled with, we may or may not be talking to someone who's struggling with the exact same thing, and they don't know how to deal with it. But now they can see someone else who's dealt with that, and they get the tools in the proverbial toolbox, right, of maybe I could try that. Maybe I could take this technique of a mental exercise, or, you know what, David was an amazing instructor at Valor. But he said his cheats were going on YouTube watching fail videos. Because if you're feeling bad, there's nothing funnier than watching some dude in a shopping cart going down a hill in a race with a buddy. Then they hit like a parking curb.
It's going to end badly.
Right.
Spoiler alert.
The human suffering is like the #1 YouTube search for comedy, right? Or something like that. So,
yeah.
But.
Well, yeah, dude. I mean, that's the whole point of the podcast.
Yeah.
Is, we talk to people, get them to share their stories, we share our stories, and if we can keep one person,
that's all that matters.
From going down the road that we went down, because maybe we catch them early and they're able to recognize, whatever in themselves, or see something in themselves
right.
of what we were doing. It's like, okay, yeah, cool. Right on.
Yep.
So,
and there's a unique way that I've started to realize when you talk to people crave the truth, because there's this wonderful security and safety that comes from the truth, right? And what I mean by that is an example that I've given to a few folks, and I've given in some formal presentations. So the example I give is, like for military or first responders, right? It's almost like when you have governmental law and spiritual law. Governmental law are like your civic duties. You know, the obligations we have as civilians to stop at stop signs. You know, not run red lights.
Yeah.
You know, actually yield, not do California stops. It's like, you know what I mean? Like,
It's the California roll, man.
I'm still stopping,
Hey,
right?
yeah.
No, that's a yield, right?
Pause.
Right. So, but those are our civic duties, right? But I believe when you answer the call to serve something above yourself, you are stepping up to the plate. You are putting yourself at a higher level of service to others, right? And then your spiritual law is nothing more than your ethical and moral beliefs, which you believe is a moral and ethical fabric of your, moral compass, what you believe to be right and wrong, right? So what I mean by that is once we've crossed that threshold of service, that calling above ourselves, something might happen where we get injured, right? So then we suffer. Something happens, we don't know what to do. All we know is we don't want to be there and we want help, right? Well, from that suffering, we start to persevere, right? We start just tackling the gritty details of our situation, kind of that tooth and nail clawing aspect of what it takes to get out of it, right? And I think some of that comes down to just accepting help when people offer a hand, right? But we persevere. So we suffer and then we persevere. From that perseverance, that, strength through adversity, like all those inspirational videos of, the movie in the background, Denzel Washington commentating over.
Oh, yeah, the training montage.
All the things like Mel Gibson stepping off the helicopter in the battlefield,
Yeah.
Those perseverance moments. That's where we start getting our character defined, because we start growing internally on ways we never saw before. The people around us begin to see there's something different about you I couldn't see before, but there's just, you seem strong, not physically strong. Your mental fortitude, your ability to push through it, right? So we have that suffering, the perseverance, and then that character. And from all of that, the most valuable of it all is hope. When we have hope for what is ahead of us, for what we can't see yet, but we know is there. We know there's a family we're living for, a country that we're fighting for, someone to our left and to our right who wears a uniform that we're serving with. We have hope that we will then survive to fight another day. So those 4 critical words are the ways that I've learned that we can rise to the occasion, that we can become stronger. Because it's not a matter of if we suffer, it's when. Because we will engage in human tragedies, in loss of family members, vehicle accidents, health concerns, depression, anxiety, all of those things that we don't like to talk about in office settings or settings in the work or in social settings, because they're awkward and people don't know how to engage them. But my reason for feeling that people don't do that so normally is because they don't know how. It's like any other language. If you don't know how to speak French, you're probably not going to try to speak it very often. You're going to sound like a Rick,
Yeah.
Like the little bit of like Spanish you might know, like I don't know, and I'm not going to try right now. I'd make a fool of myself, but that's why.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to represent myself in a bad way. But if I just took the time to learn about it, to get some key understandings of what does it mean to go through the muck, the mud, then I can gain those tools to become stronger. And that's really what led to what I mentioned earlier, the understanding of that physical battlefield versus the spiritual battlefield. So.
All right. James.
For once,
Uh-huh.
and this, listen, this is a rarity. I'm kind of speechless.
Never happens.
Never happens.
Never happens.
So let's just soak that in for a second. I think out of all of our guests,
Uh-huh.
and this isn't to insult any of them, because we've had some kick-ass ones,
Mm-hmm.
the insight in this conversation already. Like, this is what we've almost wanted the entire fucking time we've had the show.
Yeah.
Like, a true... Like, we've had people that have not dealt with the stuff that they've been on the show and talked about.
Yeah.
We've had people that have and are still dealing with it. We've had some that are still dealing with it but give fantastic advice. But for once, we have somebody that just gets it, like did their homework, made it a priority, dug down deep, and looked for the understanding of it. And I'm fucking blown away.
The
Great job, Ray.
The one thing I can say to this is not from me. I've spent my entire life. So I joined the military after 9/11 because I wanted to serve my country, something bigger than me, right? And all I wanted to do was serve at that proverbial tip of the spear. I wanted to kick indoors, weapons off the rail, that kind of stuff. And in a very small portion, well, small was most of my career, I was able to achieve that. Not the physical kicking indoors, but I was able to fight at the proverbial tip of the spear. But that's when I realized that's the physical battlefield. And the things that I was sacrificing just to keep that, I didn't realize it falls in that category of you don't know what you have until it's gone. And those were the things that I started to lose in that time. And this has captivated me to the point that, I'm a Christian, and it has catapulted me into my religious pillar of believing in Jesus and believing in God, which I won't make too much of that on the podcast here because I know some people don't have an anchored religious belief, so I don't want to offset any folks that might have a different religious following.
Dude, so here's the thing with our podcast. You talk about what you want to talk about.
It's what makes you you.
Yeah.
Well, so here's the unique piece, and let me give you an example of how much this has stirred me. When I just mentioned that whole suffering, perseverance, character, hope, I just gave you guys scripture from the Bible. But the unique thing about that is what I've learned is when I started going to church years ago, and even up to recently, like I felt like I was hearing a message that I couldn't understand, a language that I could hear the words, but I could listen to the words, but not hear the message until God rocked my world, and I started really paying attention to it.
Well, and that I don't want to interrupt you, but that illustrates your point you were talking about earlier of having all of this data and information, but not the wisdom. So it takes you getting to a certain point for your perspective to shift, and like you said, start looking at stuff through a different lens. Because we've talked about that with what can we do to break the stigma and do this and do that, and make it to where mental health is more a priority and people understand it better. And you can give people information all day long, but until they're ready to receive it and ready to look at it through a shifted perspective,
right, it's a different language. It is. And I'm going to get to something here at one point because this is, like I said, the crux of what I've learned. But the scripture that I shared with you, I say it that way because I've been in environments before where I'll try to say like, oh, this came from the New Testament, the Apostle Paul. And, there's that kind of offset like, wait, are you projecting your religion at me? And it's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to share what I've learned as being, it's truth. So I've learned to share it in a way to where if I share scripture with you, but I don't share where it came from, who said it, the historical context and everything else, most of the time I get people where they give me the, oh yeah, that's a good analogy.
Yeah.
They nod their head and they agree with it.
What a great idea.
Yeah, like I've never heard it put that way. And then after they do the north-south on me, I'm like, yeah, actually, if you look in the New Testament, the Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 5, verses 3-4 teaches us that. And then they just kind of give me the whole like head nod. And then a friend of mine one time heard me do that, and he said, did you just judo scripture on them? And I said, well, I guess. But anyway, so it catapulted me to where this isn't just something, well, let me backtrack. When I get conversations with people I've never met before, and I'm going to meet them and have a meeting with them, like formally, one of the first things I'll do to introduce myself is I'll say, I'm not interested in what you have to say. And I'll pause. Because they give me this real big wide-eyed, like, I'm sorry, excuse me? And then about 4 to 5 seconds later, I'll kind of lean forward to make it more personal. I'll say, I'm invested. I'm not here to be interested because interests fade, investments stay. I'm invested in what you have to say. And it changes the whole tone. You know,
Oh,
I've had people call
absolutely.
back and be like, they answer a phone call, the first phone call we've ever had, and the first thing they say is not even hi or hello or hey, thanks for your time. It's please explain to me why you're not interested in what I have to say, but you're invested. And that's the 35-minute conversation that we have.
Oh yeah,
Because
dude, that's a great icebreaker.
exactly, there's a way you can cross into people's personal space of, you know, that, well, I talked about earlier, the Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs of self-preservation. The reason that I believe people act that way, the reason that they don't want to have their opinions jumped on is because at the end of the day, it's a self-preservation mechanism. It's a self-defense mechanism. Because at the end of the day, we don't know why we want to keep breathing. We just know we have to. We know that we need to. So that's why you get in certain instances where I've read case studies of police officers who were involved in line of duty shootings. And they have no clue that they emptied their entire magazine. They tell you, I've shot 3 or 4 times. And they said, you actually shot all 18 rounds, right? And that's not actual data. I'm just sharing the example of that, right?
Right. No, but that's fairly common.
Because what
actually.
they're thinking of in that moment, that split second, is there's a threat that I need to neutralize, and I'm authorized use of deadly force. And all they do instinctively is start pulling the trigger. They don't even realize how many times they've shot, right? Is that wrong on them? No, I don't believe it is. But it just is another example of when we become threatened, not even physically, emotionally. You know, like the whole telephone tough guy, people puffing their chest at you.
Mm-hmm.
When we get threatened, we automatically fall into a self-defense position. So my investment in this is not just something I'm trying to just share a podcast and I'm going to check the box like, cool, I did my podcast. Like, side note, like I've always wanted to run a marathon.
Uh-huh.
So years ago I had no clue it's called the Bataan Memorial Death March. It's not just on concrete. It goes through sand, rock, water, cactus, terrain. My toes were bleeding after 26 miles.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
I literally, exactly. I literally checked the box of marathons and I will probably never do one again. I've checked that box.
That box is not even on my paper.
You know what? I just checked it spiritually. Just listen to that story.
So the vicarious checkbox,
Yep,
right?
yep,
You've
yep.
done it. So cool. Got
Yeah,
it.
by association.
Association.
I
there.
talked to a guy that did it once, so I've basically done it.
Yeah, so I'm just kind of like an expert.
Yeah. So this is not a checkbox for me. This is to the point that I've professionally transitioned everything I've learned in the last going on 2 decades of life that would have set me up for a profession, for career, for jobs, whatever. And I've completely pushed that aside. And now, just as about a month ago, I began pursuing ministry, pastoral, biblical theology studies to really understand more about humanity, humanness, and connectedness. To give you an example of what that looks like, in Scripture, they'll say, like in the parable of the mustard seed, right? It's 3 lines of Scripture, like 2 sentences.
Mm-hmm.
But to understand it from an educational standpoint, I need you to write a 15 to 20 page essay, right?
Mm-hmm.
On 3 sentences.
Yes.
So what I'm getting at is,
Yeah.
it really challenges you to learn.
Yeah. So I had a class in college. I went to a Bible college
Yeah.
called Inductive Matthew.
Okay.
This is a freshman first semester course taught at the doctoral level
Oh man.
because the
that sounds
teacher
heavy.
because the teacher was a doctor,
Right.
and that's how he taught.
Right. I think it was my foot there. There you go.
This is why we can't have nice things.
Well, normally it's Chris breaking everything.
See, we need to do
so-
like a safety walkthrough at the beginning of the podcast. Like, don't touch this, barely touch this.
right standard SOPs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, back to my point was that was common. We would take one verse
Right.
and write a 5 to 7 page paper on
Yeah.
one verse of what it meant.
Right.
And it couldn't be what you thought it meant. It had to be what he thought it meant.
Right. So that same thought process, like a lot of organizations have like a motto or a creed or something that defines like their mission statement, right?
Right.
Or like, what was that thing in Jerry Maguire called, like where he wrote that paper that he got fired over? Remember talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
He's like, it was just a memo or something like that.
Yeah.
can't
I
remember
think it
what
was like
It's like, it's just a memo, right? It was,
Yeah.
but he got fired, right?
yeah.
But my point is, if you took the one-liner of your organization and what they believe in, and sat down with your people and had like a 30-minute discussion about what does that truly mean to get deeper, I think that's what would really help connect people. Like, just, you have to find a way to get in with people.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you got to get their investment.
Right. It's reciprocal.
Yeah.
Right. So, I guess some talking points. I just want to make sure that I was there, but, there's an author named Brene Brown. Have you guys heard of her?
I'm familiar with Brene Brown.
So one of my favorite passages in her whole book, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase it, but I've learned it mostly, is she talks about vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
She says vulnerability is not weakness, it's courage. And our ability to engage our weakness measures the depth of our courage. And the way that I think of that is, if I have to engage in the gut-wrenching feelings that I had of facing the fact that I might have to walk through the doors of mental health, I might lose my family, lose my job, be labeled as a psycho, whatever, right? Facing all of that, if I can do that, that's courage. That's stepping up to the plate. That's getting the tools I need to become stronger. And I guess I could make a point that, I guess since I went through Valor, if you fast forward to 2 years, I think that I'm on that path, because I don't feel like if you go through that program to then start a podcast or to pursue ministry, that was just happenstance. Because if you look at data points on a timeline, life was good, doing this, spiked down on the graph, got some mental education, and then all of a sudden, just look at the data trend, right? Because everyone likes data. Everyone likes something to feel safe and comfortable with, right? So all that happened at Valor was we exercised our minds. We gained different perspectives on how we could fight a battle we had no idea we were even engaged with. Usually what we do in our modern society is, if I'm feeling angry or frustrated, well, liquor store's down the road. I'm just going to numb it. I'm going to dull it, or drugs or whatever your vice is, right?
Mm-hmm.
We find a way to escape it.
Yep.
We
don't face it. Don't
Right.
own our shit.
Right. But that's the difference, though, is if you're going to run from it, why not attack it? Right? Why not just give it a stiff arm? You know what I mean?
It's advancing to the rear, as our Marine friends would say.
No, I think they said Chuck Norris never retreats. He just attacks in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
I think that's how this goes. So let's just attack in the opposite direction.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. No, but you're right, dude. And that's part of that whole stigma thing, is because it is viewed, by and large, especially in our career fields,
Right.
as a weakness.
Mm-hmm.
Because being vulnerable and admitting that shit's not going exactly right and I need some help to figure it out.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure James is going to hate this, but the old suck it up buttercup,
Yeah.
I brought it back. For the win.
I will say this, though, that there is something to be said about shared suffering, right? And what I mean by that is, if you had the lineup of a firefighter, a police officer, an EMT, a military member, whatever, right there, there's already going to be a common bond that all of them share. But there will also be a delineating cultural perspective that separate them. The issues that are prevalent to a police officer aren't going to be the same issues relevant to a firefighter or an EMT or a military member. They're unique. There's commonalities, but there's differences. And let me give you an example. If, from my military experience, if I was told to go to an auditorium because we're going to have some special guest speakers talk about the importance of getting mental health, right? Okay, cool. I mean, is it mandatory? No, but we should go to encourage. Okay, that's fine. It's time off and it's encouraged. So we go. And they have some amazing guest speakers brought in, right? Let's say they bring in Dwayne Johnson or they bring in Kevin Hart, right? I'm probably going to go voluntarily. I just want to hear them talk, right?
Yeah.
And they might have me rolling, busting a gut laughing, right? But their purpose there and what their message would be to deliver is the importance of seeking mental health and taking that proverbial knee. Cool. There's still going to be a part of me, and I don't believe I'm the only person that thinks this way. There will be a part of me that is going to look at them and ask, what do you have to lose? I can tell you what I have to lose if I go through those doors. My service, my position, my title, my family, my honor, my dignity, my benefits. I can just keep going. Or like in the military, we have army and use of force. We have our security clearances. We have personal reliability programs. We have things we can lose just by going through those doors. And I could look at them and ask them, what do you have to lose? And I might walk away from there enjoying the briefing, but I'm still not going to go to mental health. Now, you get someone on stage wearing my uniform who's still in it, who gives a testimony to having gone through the entrenched process of mental health, having walked through the doors, having survived it, and is still wearing their uniform, you've just planted a whole different seed. In fact, I go so far to say that you could even have a veteran come on, or a retired firefighter, retired police officer come in and say, this is why it's important. But the same question could still be asked. What do you have to lose? You may have served, but you're not serving now. And that's not a discredit to them. That is what is in the fight. You're on the battlefield.
You know what's interesting is that point right there is very much realized by almost everybody in our profession, but it's being masked as a younger generational problem. It is the younger generation only cares about what's going on now. And I don't think that's the case. And it's because of exactly what I don't know that I've ever been God, I'm fucking speechless again. I don't know that I've ever been able to put into words, like, right now we see it a lot with the pandemic.
Right.
It is a youth problem. It's the young nurses in the hospitals. It's the young firefighters and EMTs. It's the young officers on the street. They're dealing with all of this. And it's not a like, you're not doing it, shut up, old timer. There just carries extra weight of those that are going through it, that are wearing uniform. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of lessons, a lot of experience to be learned from the veterans, from the retired guys. It just carries different weight when you have that uniform on.
It does. And think about it from a physical perspective. You are in the battle at the moment, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think it's along the same lines. A lot of people, and I know myself, I was this way, was, okay, I'm having this problem, right? And I kind of, realize that.
Right.
I'm the only one. And that's part of it is you feel alone. Oh, yeah. So I'm the only one having this problem. So if I talk about it, then I'm the weak one. Because everybody else has been on the same calls. Everybody else has done the same thing, but I'm the only one with the problem. Right. And so, yeah, that's why I think going to Valor and doing like you talked about, the group setting was, first day in there, we're sitting there and everybody's reading their stories and all that stuff. Sure. And I'm like, wow, he's fucked up. She's fucked up. I'm fucked up. Okay, I'm not the only one. It's not just me.
Shared suffering.
Exactly.
Right. So I'm going to save the core of this for a little bit because there's some other points I want to bring up too. So one of the fun demonstrations I'll give in some of the meetings that I'll have, or some of the luncheons that I'll host, or some of the classes I'll teach, is the hallway lesson. What I'll do is I'll get someone in the room. We could do it here, but it's not appropriate with all the mics and everything. But just imagine you're in a hallway, right? And not even imagine. You're in a hallway, because everyone's done this. I guarantee you everyone at some point has done this. You're walking down the hall, and all of a sudden someone's at the other end. Now you're challenged. Do I want to look at the imaginary art on the wall? Am I just going to pretend like my phone has something on it? Am I going to pick at my nails? Like, there's a person walking down, I'm going to engage with them, right? You don't want to be rude, right? So a common thing people say is, hey, how's it going, right? So you would ask me that walking down the hall. Yeah. And my response to you would be, hey, how's it going? But here's the funny part. You're going to keep walking that way. I'm going to keep walking that way. Neither one of us answered the question, and we keep going our own ways. So my question then, why ask? And by the way, that's not just one person's fault, remember, because if I ask you the question first, and then you ask me, we're both held responsible in the engagement of replying, right? But
proverbial Mexican emotional standoff.
so I ask you, so why would you even do that, right?
That is a really good question, Ray. That I don't have an answer for you.
I want to say because I'm not an asshole, but on the other hand, what's like,
Yeah,
is
it kind of-
ignoring you the asshole or not answering your question being the asshole?
It kind of seems like you're the asshole either way.
Yeah.
So
Sorry, my friend Ray says I can't talk to you. Bye.
I just learned I can't ask how's it going anymore.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna put my
Man,
blinder on and just keep on walking.
You just ruined 50% of my conversational repertoire. Thanks, Ray.
So, but check this out though. This is what I'm coming to learn. We do this because it's, again, go back to what I mentioned earlier. And this isn't stuff everything I'm talking about is not from Ray. These are things I've learned from many mentors, many scholars, many people. These are just things that I'm learning. Affection versus affliction, right? We want to treat people the way we want to be treated. So it's almost an autonomous, subconscious act of, I'm going to be nice to you because I want you to be nice to me. So I'm going to ask you how you're doing because, one, it engages you. So I'm acknowledging your presence, right? And then it crosses another threshold of sincerity, of I'm going to ask you a personal question of how are you doing? But the subconscious piece on the other side of the fence is we both know we have jobs to do. I'm just going to be cordial and polite and say hi by acknowledging you, and then kind of crossing that fence of sincerity of, hey, how's it going? But leave it open-ended, right? So that's what I'm coming to learn is why we do that. And I've caught myself doing that several times. But the fun challenge here is when it happens, now that you kind of know it,
Yeah.
when someone asks you, hey, how's it going? Stop and answer them. And in about 2 to 3 seconds, pay attention to their body language.
Shit, I gotta talk.
Now they realize, wait a minute, this guy's serious. You'll see
Yep.
the look on their face. They'll kind of hesitate and look at their watch and
Yep.
like,
I've done it. Like, hey, brother, how are you? Not good. No, fuck.
you just opened up the door.
Yeah. Well,
You know
and
what I
I
mean?
think, we've kind of talked about it before, but, a lot of people nowadays, like, there's not sincere communication. It's, I'm going to pause for you to talk. I'm not really listening to what you're saying. I'm
Right.
waiting for my opportunity to talk.
Exactly.
And I think that kind of goes with that a little bit.
Well, because think about it. Like I said, affection versus affliction, right? We want to be heard. We want to be acknowledged. We want to be told we're special. We want the attaboys on the back. We want the awards every week, employee of the month. We crave that. We crave that affection, right? But at the same time, we kind of don't in a way because we don't want to be made the center of attention. Sometimes we have stage fright, whatever the case is. But at the core of our humanness, we want to be embraced. That's why God gave us emotions. That's why we have feelings. So the feelings that we have, I've come to learn, are kind of like a radar. They give us the ability to make an informed decision. If I'm scared, probably going to run. If I'm angry, I'm probably going to fight. If I'm feeling affectionate because I haven't seen my wife in a month, I'm probably going to feel adorned and want to be...
Whoa.
I'm just saying.
PG-13.
We're keeping. I'm just saying, spend time with her. So hold on. Gary Chapman makes a book called The 5 Love Languages. So quality time, acts of service, affirmation, gifts of whatever. Right. So I'm going to want to invest that time with my wife. Right. So, but that's the core of our existence. Right. We crave those pieces. So our emotions give us that ability. The difference is that, remember that mindless emotionalism I mentioned earlier? The only way to get to your heart emotionally is through your mind. So think about it for a minute. Whenever you've had those moments in life where you've been nervous and your heart starts to jump through your chest, it's because your mind told you something of, I'm about to run into a burning building. I'm about to engage the battle on the field. Your mind is telling you something, and now you're having a physiological reaction in your chest. Because now your other emotions, your heart-led emotions, your spirit is giving you that discernment to make another decision, right? So you can't have a spiritually led, morally and ethical decision without it going through your mind first. That is the first filter. And that's the problem that a lot of us have, and that's a problem that I had. My filter up here was, don't tell me how to do my job. Don't tell me I'm wrong. Don't tell me X, Y, and Z. Don't tell me that, right? And I could be very well wrong and was wrong. But that comes back to, we have to embrace what gifts we have, the strengths we have, and then share those other people genuinely. That superficial, how are the Chiefs doing? How's the weather? Walking down the... That's just a gateway to start. The real conversations come into play after that. And that's where you get those deeper, more intellectually, spiritually bonding moments with the people that are around you every day.
Ray, I got a question.
Yeah.
What is the difference, or is there a difference between desire for affection and desire of purpose? Because you referenced, like we want the attaboys, we want the employee of the month, we want the affection. But I think especially in our line of work, in service, military, fire, police, EMS,
sure,
there is that desire of purpose. We want to know what we're doing is worth a shit.
I gotcha. I feel you.
And I was just curious on your opinion. Is that the same? Does it just look different in maybe first responders and military than it does like normal people? Or
so let's get into head knowledge versus heart knowledge. Head knowledge is multimodal. Here's an example. I can feel that this bottle is cold, right? I can taste that it's water. I can hear that it's in a plastic bottle, right? That's multimodal. I can smell it, and I can, if it had an aroma like, fruit, I could smell the fruit, right? So let me ask you this. Can you taste patriotism? Can you see it? Now, I'm not saying see a flag and see that. I'm saying, can you see it? Can you hear it? You can associate with fireworks and explosions and 4th of July, and you can associate with flags and red, white, and blue, and those are associations. But from a perception standpoint, from the multimodal, right, can you feel patriotism? Can you taste it?
I would have to say no unless you're talking about apple pie.
Right. See, exactly.
or Busch Light.
So it's the same thing as hope or encouragement or love or faith. You can associate how we see those things, but you can't actually see them or feel them or taste them or you touch them, right? Mm-hmm. We have ways of touching. We know love is typically something that's soft, enduring, roses, dates, that's associations, right? So that purpose that you're talking about, that affection, right? That gets into the why. So I believe that, Simon Sinek, he's a pretty renowned public speaker. You can Google Simon Sinek. He's got a ton of good videos. He's got this one called the rule of the golden circle or something like that. And it's the how, what, and the why. And essentially, and it's a pretty good theory. A lot of people, millions of people have followed this. As humans, we want to know why we're doing anything. Why am I doing this? Right? Which is a good crux, if you will, for giving purpose. Right? But I've transitioned my understanding, at least as being a godly man, right? As a follower of Jesus, I know why. It's for eternal salvation. It's for the life of living in heaven, right? So now I know why. The real question then comes into how. But you can apply that same methodology into the purpose of, why you're doing what you're doing. It's for a calling of something greater than you. So the real question isn't why. You already know it. The real question is how. How do I achieve that? How do I practice that? How do I share it? How do I strengthen it? Because it's like anything else. It's like spiritual gifts. If you can pour the foundation and you can do the roofing and I can do everything else, we can build a house together. But if you're missing, we can't build the house. If you're missing, we can't build the house. We need each other because we all have our own independent strengths and weaknesses. And we can't build a house without each other. So, in my opinion, the purpose is not why, because you guys know why. It's the how.
Well, and I think where a lot of people get tripped up is because they forget the why.
Absolutely.
And you see that a lot with, especially what we're dealing with in our career field, with burnout being at such a huge rate right now.
Exactly.
People forget. and I don't even want to say forget, but why they got into the field in the first place gets overshadowed by everything else.
Mm-hmm. I think something that is a good example of what I've learned is, from the military standpoint, growing up watching all the military movies, I thought like, oh, I'm going to be crawling through the muck and boot camp's going to be a lot of yelling and push-ups and fights and all this stuff. And then at least for the Air Force side, we fold laundry for 8 hours a day in boot camp.
It's like Navy boot camp.
Wait a minute. Is it? Anyway.
Yeah.
So, but that patriotism, my goodness, it's there. And you can look at any graduation video of a flight going from boot camp, and when they're reciting Jodi's or reciting the Airman's Creed or anything else, it is loud. It is proud. It is from their gut and their heart. Then later on in life, you go to the graduation ceremonies, and it's just, I'm an American Airman. I'm a warrior. I have instrument. It's not as much fire.
Yeah.
But the reason for that gets back into those distractions, right? Because early in your career, you know why you're there. But then as you begin to progress professionally, well, now you have to grow. You have some additional responsibilities, additional duties. You have other requirements of the job. You become more invested in a way that there's more on the line to lose. Now you've got more career time in, 7, 10, 12, 15 years. You get to that point where, you've got enough that the burnout might be there, but you don't want to give up. You don't want to give up the retention, the pension, the retirement, and all that other stuff. So you start focusing more on what is it going to take just to get through this. You start changing your perspective from the patriotism piece to just the suck it up piece.
Yep.
Because now you don't want to get demoted. You don't want to get pulled off duty. You still want to get a chance of promotions or opportunities. So the baggage begins to grow. And that's just professionally. We're not even talking about anything personally in your own personal life either.
You know as well as I do that people in our line of work, the job is the very last thing to suffer.
Right.
We will do everything.
Sacrifice for the job.
We'll do everything we can to keep going in that career.
It's exactly. And I think another unique paradigm to think about too is how much time do we spend as professionals in that line of work at our place of business versus our home. So an example be as a married man, if I was with my family right now, I would be spending maybe 2 to 3 hours, maybe 4 hours in the evening with my family.
Mm-hmm.
For 8 to 10 hours of the day, I would be with my colleagues. So help me understand this then. If for simple math, if I spend 5 hours a day, Monday through Friday with my family, that's 25 hours, right? If I spend 10 hours a day with my colleagues, that's 50 hours. I'd argue to say that I think the people I work with are, from a family perspective, a little bit closer. I spend more time with them, right? I have a different emotional investment with my family. But from the people I work with, I feel there's a false filter there of not letting them into your lives, not letting them into your business. But that's counterintuitive because you're already spending twice as much time in that ratio than you are with the people that you live at home with. They actually probably know you a little bit more on your quirks and isms and everything else.
Yeah.
Like one of the things that's real common when I was going through one of my phases was as soon as breakfast got done for the chow hall, it was you got to let Bobby, Jimmy, and Timmy, whatever, you got to give them the first 3 stalls because they're going to take up and don't get in their way. Like you just knew those guys were going to be in there for a hot minute.
Yep.
And they're big men, don't get in their way. You just get to know them as a person. So to me, this is where I'm learning. It doesn't make any sense why you couldn't cross that threshold and get to know them more than just their favorite sports team or what they like to do on the weekends. You already have that time, the most valuable commodity we have on this earth, with them. So how are you investing it?
Yeah.
That's the question.
Well, that's a good question. So I think, I don't know, from my own perspective, it's like you were talking about earlier, that maybe that fear of vulnerability.
For sure.
You don't want to let people in too much, and you want to keep business and personal life.
Mm-hmm.
But, like you said, you're spending twice as much time with the people you work with.
Right.
I don't like having guests on that like gives us more questions than we give them. We're here to like interview him, and all of a sudden it's like an interview of us, and I'm like, oh fuck.
Yeah. See, I'm going to need you to bring your A game and step it up. I probably could have prepared you better because I know Ray a little bit.
Yeah, can I have gotten a heads up? I'm over here like, fuck.
Well, you were out of town all week on your little motorcycle trip, so
Sounds like a little bit of jealousy.
Just a tiny little bit.
Yeah, but we won't talk about that. But
no, we
Yeah.
won't talk about that.
So, and I was thinking about how to have this podcast, and I thought, you know what, one of the other issues that I had when I was, in many circles is I hear people talking about their struggles and their adversities and their challenges, and I'm like, cool, man, I'm hearing you say this message, but I'm not seeing it because, it's like when I went to church and I said I was hearing the sermon, but I wasn't like absorbing and hearing the message. So, we've talked quite a bit about these pieces here, but really, as far as from me, to this point, I haven't really been vulnerable with this podcast. So if it's fine, I'm going to cross that bridge.
Absolutely.
Because I feel like I would be a hypocrite to sit here and talk about all this stuff, but it wouldn't give the credentials if I didn't cross that line to show what it really is.
Right.
So by doing that, what led me to mental health was I was peaking at the profession of what I wanted to do. I was at the A game of what I wanted to achieve professionally. But there was something happening in my life that I couldn't understand. There was something that was distancing me from my family, from my friends, that I could not understand. I was becoming extremely forgetful. I would get the mail and not even realize it was in my pocket. And I would ask my wife when she got home, hey, did you get the mail today? No. And I would go take my clothes off to change and go to bed. It'd be in my cargo pant pocket. I was blacking out. I would be in the house and just fall down and black out. Like I had no clue what was going on. And I had just crossed that proverbial ladder of climbing that I did not want to stop climbing. So I kept all this to myself. But the blacking out piece scared me. Because at that time, I had my 2-year-old, my 3-year-old. And it scared the shit out of me that I would get in my truck and I would black out and I would wreck. I was afraid I would kill my boys. And that scared me. That was the moment when I realized it's not about me. It's about my family, my children, the people around me, the people I work with. I had to give up everything that I had fought for years, professionally, academically, because I knew that I needed to get help. So I went against everything that my, compartmentalized box kept telling me.
Yeah, dude.
It's like, the box is sprung. The leak is out.
Throw another iron band on there. It'll hold. Cardboard is indestructible.
It didn't hold. And I remember taking my wife out to, there's a place in Sedalia called Katie's. It's a barbecue place. Mm-hmm. And I had a conversation with my wife that I was afraid to have because as the man of my house, I had to tell my wife that I think I needed to get mental help. And I didn't know what that meant. All I knew was I think I needed to go to the psych ward and get stuck in a jacket. And I didn't know what that meant. I just knew that I needed help. And she supported me and endorsed me. And I crossed that bridge. And I started getting the help I needed, but it got worse. The blackouts got worse. The scare, the fear was there. And I didn't know what to do. I was scared. And I knew that I needed to do more. So for people that haven't taken mental health, they see mental health as the 1920s proverbial shock treatment, electrodes to your head and straight jackets and all that crap, right? I'm guilty of it too. I thought that's what it was going to be like. And I was scared to even say that I needed to go to a psych ward, right?
Hey Ray, I have a question.
What's up?
Were you ready for your wife, to say yes?
To my getting help? I was afraid that she would see me as a weaker person because I'm the man of the house. I fix the cars. I cut the lawn. I do all the work. You know, I thought she would see me as a lesser person.
Were you more mentally prepared for her to say no or for her to say yes?
For her to say no. I was afraid that I wouldn't have the support that I thought I had in a marriage. I was afraid I would be outcast from my wife, and I was truly afraid that if she didn't support me, that I would go down a path of pure darkness, because she's my wife, and I was scared. So that was a relief to have that support, right? To have someone close to me, which doesn't have to be your wife, right? But that's kind of on a different topic. But so when I finally made that crossing threshold to get mental help, it was what I wasn't expected. It wasn't what I perceived it to be. It was this whole new world of that toolbox we talked about before, of just getting stronger and learning how to fight things that I didn't even know how to fight that were there. Like the temptation just to want to grab alcohol and drown myself in alcohol. Or the temptation if I wanted just to jump online and just look at porn because it was something that would distract me, right? It's just anything that I thought I couldn't fight. I started learning different ways of the feelings and emotions that I was having. And I got stronger from that. And I thought that I was on a better path. And then when I thought everything was going to be where it needed to be, I was then told that I had to get a psych eval. And I learned that I was not being supported the way that I thought I was from my superiors. So I got the psych eval, and the results came back, and the administering psychologist said, I'm going to diagnose you with having a narcissistic personality disorder, which is pretty dark. I mean, essentially, a person of that severity of a personality disorder is someone who only cares about themselves. They violate the law. They have zero regard for human compassion, right? So I just kind of nodded my head and said, okay. And I went and got a second opinion very shortly after. And this is a God moment here. You know, in the middle of COVID, right, where you couldn't get a medical appointment for anything within months, I'd called this doctor, and he said, I'm not even going to tell you who this guy is. He's my colleague. Here's his number. Just call him. It was really weird. So I called him. This older gentleman answered, and he said, can you be here next week within like 3 days? And I said, yeah, I'm on. I spent the next 6 sessions, a psych eval and everything, with a psychologist who was a retired Air Force colonel who was familiar with, you know, the Air Force culture. Mm-hmm. So he knew a lot more about that. And
cultural competency is so huge.
The shared suffering aspect, right? He understood the variables on the table.
Yeah.
And he gave me the same psych eval. And something that I learned from this process is when you take these evals, you don't just take them, and if there's nothing, they can't say, well, you're nothing, you're good. No, they have to label you as something. It's either not otherwise specified or something small, but it's still a diagnostic. There's some diagnostic criteria that you get labeled with. Mm-hmm. So I took the psych eval. I got the same test that I got from my superiors. And of the 10 areas on that psych eval, there's 3 over on this side of the graph and then 10 over here. The 10 are the pathological area that say if you actually have a disorder. Mm-hmm. I had nothing. And there was one over here that was high, which is not abnormal. He said, this area here is unique. And he said, you know, when I did my research, I actually found there's actually a subculture that you most closely relate to. And he said, it's actually predominant throughout, not even America, but throughout the world. And he said, this subculture is called Christianity. And I just kind of laughed. And I said, so I'm a narcissistic Christian? And he said, I wouldn't say it that way. I would say you're definitely not both. You're definitely one or the other. Anyway, but that's what, you know, kind of led to this. I became aware of what we'll talk about here shortly in just a minute, is that physical warfare and that spiritual warfare. Because I've learned that on one of them, only a very few actually engage in that. And the other one, 100% of every single human in this world engages with it. So I'm not sure if there's an earmark for your podcast, but this would be, if there was a message that I would love to share with people, this would be the message. So I guess before we get into that, do you guys have any questions or comments or?
No, dude, just
spiel it.
Keep rolling.
Spiel it. Okay. So I was in a forum a while back, and there was a gentleman who was talking about one of the problems that they had about trying to share educational material. Is he said he was the only person on their staff who was able to share the perspective of physical warfare because he had been deployed, he had been in convoys, and his testimony, right, could speak to that.
Mm-hmm.
And the audience could collect that from him because he was the person involved. It wasn't just a story that was being shared with them that they could read and learn about. So the credibility that he brought into the story really amplified the message being delivered because he'd been through the suck, right?
Yeah.
And I heard him and I listened, and he said, but the problem is that my staff can't do this. They don't have that. They haven't been a part of this. They've never done this. And this is just a limb fact we have. And I kind of smiled and I said, may I respectfully disagree? Sure. Yeah. And you might be asking why. And I said, yeah, I'll share why. Because what I've learned is this isn't just military related, and it's actually in every walk of life. But, from the first responder community, from firefighter, EMS, and police, it transcends a very close relationship. So in the physical battlefield, we have people who kick in doors, who save lives, who see the whites of people's eyes, right? They taste the blood. They have the sweat. They are engaged in first dimension warfare, right? First dimension warfare is defined as just that. I can see the hairs on your face. I can see your fingernails. I can detect the things about you from a first dimension. Second dimension is kind of that, the shape of a human body, the shape of a building. You can't see the windows clearly. You can't define the window panes or the knocks. It's from a further perspective. And the third dimension is that 30,000 foot view of you see land masses, you see cities, right? First dimension warfare is physical warfare. But only this many people, finite number of people engage in that. So those people, from a mental health perspective, are commonly referred to now as folks that qualify for a newer study of psychology, which is like post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress injury, things that insurance companies can now identify as being, oh, that's okay, because, back in the 1930s and 40s, it was called shell shock, or another form of warfare that wasn't understood.
Wartime nervosa.
Right? So
Yeah.
we've advanced in our psychological studies of understanding the trauma affects of physical warfare.
Yeah, you can add moral injury into that too.
Right. So to give a point, if somebody's physically injured and has a broken bone, we can take an x-ray of it and go, oh, this is exactly what's needed to fix that bone. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah.
But if somebody had a mental break somewhere, can you take an x-ray of it to say that's exactly the problem and we know how to fix it?
No. And we have talked about that ad nauseum.
We're not there.
Yeah, no. And that's one of the things that probably makes removing the stigma of people who seek mental health services makes it harder, because it is not a visible injury. And
invisible wounds.
Yeah, and it's easier to fake.
Exactly. Invisible wounds is another new title, if you want to call it that, for moral injuries, injuries and invisible wounds. But what this staff member told me, and the reason that I shared this with him, is because I believe that what he saw as a weakness that his staff couldn't share, that I've come to learn is something that they have every tool in the toolbox to share. They just didn't know how. And why I say that is because on the spiritual warfield, on spiritual warfare, actually, to back up real quick, so on the physical warfield, that's the fog and friction afoot, the physical battlefield. That's amidst that battlefield, right? But in spiritual warfare, it's a battlefield of the human heart, right? It's a battlefield amidst that fog and friction that we don't understand. But the unique attribute to that is it's not just the physical battlefield that people can now define and fight through, because everybody on the spiritual battlefield engages with that warfare every single day, whether it's from depression, anxiety, hopelessness, interpersonal relationships, peer pressure, whatever the case may be. whatever the thing is that causes our emotions to stir and give us the ability to make that informed decision, like we talked about earlier, that's spiritual warfare. When you have the inability to make a decision because now you're scared, you're anxious, you're hopelessness, or whatever, your fight, flight, or freeze, whatever you want to call it, you don't know how to engage it. The power behind all that allows you and everybody else to become a weapon in that fight is when you harness your battlefield and you share it. When you give the testimony of the things you've been on the battlefield with about your anxieties, your depressions, your common shared suffering, you give that to somebody else, then they finally realize something you mentioned a second ago, which is, I'm not alone in this. Because we all have moments of anxiety or hopelessness or depression, period. That's called human emotions. And to deny that you have emotions is to say, essentially, you're denying humanity. And that's fact.
You're not wrong.
So that's where I believe every single person, regardless of their age, their education, their training, their life experience, has the ability to be on the front lines of the spiritual warfare. Because it doesn't matter how biologically advanced an age we get. I can be 18 years old or I can be 95 years old. But there are still going to be things in this life that I don't know and don't understand. Things that I could be childlike at. A term that adults really don't like to be told that they're in the category of.
Yeah.
You're being childlike, you know what I mean?
You're being childish. Stop it. Yeah.
But really, when you get told that, it's a demeaning phrase, but I mean, I'm 36 years old. And if I'm going to start a new profession, I have childlike understandings of how that works. I don't know what happens. I mean, I have to literally take the advice of maybe someone who's 24, but they spent 6 years in college getting an engineering degree to help me understand what it is that I need to learn, right? So there's at no point in your human life that you will know every single attribute of this planet, of every country, every nation, every people, every food, nothing. Because at the end of the day, we have something in common. We breathe the same air, we eat the same foods, and I like to joke with people that say, like, you know, I'm independent. I do things on my own. I'm like, okay, really? Well, then you can probably sell your car because you didn't forge the metal for your engine, and you can probably go plant your food out in the back pasture so you can start growing your own wheat for the bread you just ate, or sewing your own clothes because the clothes you just wore came from the Philippines or from where, right? So you're not an independent person.
No man is an island.
No, right? And the way I like to joke with people is like, if there's so much indifference that we have, I say, can we at least agree on this? I put my pants on one leg at a time, just like you. You might be a left leg first person, and I might be a right leg first person. We might even try to do like the 2-leg hop, where like you do the jump, you know what I mean? Like, have you ever tried that?
It's only if I'm in a hurry.
Only if you're in a hurry, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we have something in common with everybody. And it doesn't matter what that commonality is. Take it back to a basic level. And then cross that threshold and start getting past all that superficial, how are the Chiefs doing? What's the weather going to be like? What are your plans this weekend? And start engaging in more intellectual conversation, because the more you share, the more you're going to receive.
Right. And the more that you focus on your commonalities with people,
right,
and the less you focus on the divisive aspects. Because
right,
generally people have more in common than they have, you know,
absolutely,
in opposition.
Absolutely.
And the ability to sit here and have a conversation, and you give your viewpoint, I give my viewpoint. Hey, you know what? I know why, you know, I can get why you believe that way. I believe this. And then you can say, yeah, okay, I can see that, but I still believe this thing.
Right.
Cool. We're still going to be friends.
Exactly.
Agree to disagree.
Exactly. We're going to have different preferences.
Yeah.
You know, it's part of human nature.
Yeah. But somewhere along the lines, we have lost that in this country, of being able to have a civil conversation.
Right. And I believe that comes down to nothing more than self-preservation. We are a very blessed nation to have the many comforts that we have. And we're also a very influenced nation on the things we should be driving, the clothes we should be wearing. the styles we should be supporting. I mean, it's something as a culture that we're influenced by. Well, our culture doesn't embrace people who are weak. In fact, vulnerability from another perspective as weakness can be bad. If you said we have a vulnerable military, you're really kind of saying you have a military that can probably be trampled on, right? Mm-hmm. So the connotation behind vulnerability carries inherent weakness that is defeat, right? But when it comes to mental strength and mental longevity, vulnerability is the complete opposite of that. Because I can make a promise to anybody who challenges themselves with this. If you can cross the vulnerability threshold with the people you work with, the people in your family, something else, any one of those lanes, you're going to get something back you never saw before. You're going to get a more sincere reaction. You're going to get a more deep hug. You're going to have conversations in the future that are no longer this awkward setting and awkward silences. I can meet people for the first time, especially from a Christian perspective, but I can meet people for the first time and talk for 30 minutes to an hour to 2 hours. The whole stopping in the hallway thing, I've done that for 45 minutes before and realized I needed to get back to work. You know, it's not a matter of wanting to have your voice heard so much as sometimes other people just need to be spoken to, not spoken at, because there's a big difference.
Well, and there's a deeper form of connection there.
Absolutely.
And if you're able to do that with your core group,
mm-hmm.
and then that expands out with maybe their core group and expands out and expands out and expands out, who knows where it's going to go from there.
And another thing I've noticed that's unique to our culture too is we have created this society of comforts and expediency, right? We have 24/7 this, we have instant information to this, our phones download speeds at 0.5 seconds for 3 million results on Google. Like, we have ingrained this way of living life that is so fast paced and very much down a singular lane. So for instance, we get up, and this is just an example, you know, if you set your alarm for 6 in the morning every day, your coffee's going to be ready by 6:30. You're going to be in the shower by 6:45. You're going to be out the door by 7:15, in the office by 7:45, logged into your computer by 8. You know, what I'm saying is we have this routine of rigidness because we're creatures of comfort. We find comfort in routines. And I guarantee you, anytime your routines have been thrown off, your day is ruined.
I hate it.
Like, how many times has your GPS, like, you've been driving down the road and there's a roadblock that your GPS didn't tell you, and all of a sudden you're just like, I'm lost. What happened? Help me. You're just, I'm lost. There's a roadblock you didn't tell me was here, you know?
Yeah.
Thank God the voice is calm.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Make a U-turn.
One of the most beautiful aspects that I've learned in this journey here is to take the unexpected turn, to take the path less traveled, the road less traveled, whatever you want to call it. And it comes down to getting off the beaten path. And the more that you invest in others, the more that investment returns to you. So if that's nothing more than getting out of your walk down the hall, no one's there this time, right?
Yeah.
Walk down the hall, and instead of just going straight to your office, you just pop in and see somebody and just talk to them for 5 minutes. Or on a Friday, you just randomly go to their office with a sticky note and says, hey, here's a fun song I think we should all listen to. Like, just find different ways just to connect to people, because here's the biggest problem too, in my opinion. We also live in a society where it's easy to disconnect from humans.
Absolutely.
Our cell phones are a prime example of that. We're losing the ability to have human connectedness. We're losing the ability to be social creatures. Yes, there are advantages, but let me give you an example.
Well, people mistake what they do on their cell phone with the texting and the TikTok and the Facebook as social connection. I mean, I can give you examples of fire stations I've been in where you've got 4, 8, 12 people sitting around a kitchen table, and they will be texting each other.
Mm-hmm.
Not actually talking. They will text.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
It's like,
oh yeah,
put your phone down. Talk, communicate.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
So here's an example I give to some folks when I teach classes. So if you ask me how I'm doing, and I've got my phone, and I'm having a horribly wrecked day, I'm suffering, I've got anxiety, I'm at a point of a dark path, right? and you ask me how I'm doing, but I respond back with, hey man, it's all good, and I give you the whole like, hey brah, thumbs up, pray, you know, like all the emojis, right?
Oh yeah.
You could think everything's fine. So ask me that question right now.
How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
Yeah.
The difference is I'm not hiding behind the phone, and I can't hide behind my emotions because they're so real. I'm going to tell you that I'm good, but my voice inflection's down. My body language says that I'm not. The verbal cues are way off. Whereas now, I'm not hiding behind my emojis anymore, my big smiley faces and my 2 thumbs up and all that crap, you know. Superficial, right? Very rarely do we get the opportunity to see someone on the spiritual battlefield. When we do, we can't just say, okay, man, well, if you need something, let me know. That's the wrong answer. If someone answers you that way, that's the time to be like, we're going to get a coffee. We're going to go talk. We're going to go listen to something. You have to be there with them in the fight. And sometimes sometimes it will always be uncomfortable because, let's just face it, fighting is never comfortable. No one joins a fight club for the fun of it except what? Brad Pitt and Edward Norton. No, just those guys.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yes, the spiritual battlefield and physical battlefield, it's something that only a few engage on physically. Everybody, 100% of humanity engages spiritual battlefield every single day.
Yeah. Dude, it's so funny that we had you on today because yesterday, and well, James wasn't here for yesterday, but we had a guy on who is going through a chaplaincy program.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, right
so
on.
it's like, yeah.
That's legit.
Yeah.
That's
his
awesome.
perspective was a little bit, I mean, kind of the same, but a little bit different. So,
Sure.
I mean, yeah.
We've all got our own flavors, but that's what makes us unique. So that goes back to the spiritual gifts piece of the building the house, right?
Yeah.
You know, the body is comprised of many parts, of the hand, the foot, the eye, and the ear. But we don't wake up someday and just say, you know what? I don't need my foot today. I'm good. And cut it off.
Yeah.
We don't wake up like, I just need my right hand today. I'm going to leave my left hand. No, we need all of these body parts to function as a whole, one singular unit.
Right.
Right. We as a people, we need each other because we all have strengths and weaknesses. And through those strengths, we can survive to become stronger. But through the weaknesses, that's where we really rise to the occasion and become even more stronger.
Yep.
But we need each other. Otherwise, you're cutting off the foot. You're cutting off the hand.
Yeah. Well, and, you know, it's one of those things where, and what we talked about the other day was there's 3 aspects, you know, of you hear a lot about physical fitness, being fit for duty in our jobs.
Oh, for sure.
Right? And then now, at least in being a firefighter, paramedic, EMT, we're starting to see more of the, okay, now you have to be mentally fit for duty. There's still that spiritual aspect.
Absolutely.
And it's not getting talked about.
Because people don't know how. Because people know if you want to get physically fit, you go to the gym. Socially strong, you go join social networks and get socially strong. Get emotionally fitness, get emotionally strong. You keep yourself out of situations that challenge your emotions, right? If you're the kind of person who doesn't like scary movies, okay, then especially don't watch them at 8 o'clock at night. You know,
Yeah.
like
In a dark house, all by yourself.
Don't put yourself in situations that facilitate that, right? But spiritually, like right here. So what I did for my presentation the other month or whatever it was, I defined it. So spirituality in one definition is strengthening a set of beliefs, principles, or values that sustain an individual's sense of well-being and purpose. Spiritual fitness is about having a sense of purpose and meaning in your life. It's essential to an individual's resiliency and esprit de corps, is vital to a unit's mission accomplishment. It includes, but is not limited to, worldviews, religious faith, sense of purpose, sense of connectedness, values, ethics, and morals. So, simply put, if you're spiritual, which every person is spiritual because you have a belief in something, spirituality is not religion. Religion is an established practice of essentially what your spiritual belief is. So, people tend to blur those because they can be confusing. You can be spiritual without being religious, but you can't be religious without being spiritual. Does that make sense?
Unfortunately, yes, it does.
So we are all spiritual creatures, period, because that follows the same methodology of if you deny you have emotions, then you're denying your humanity, because all of us have emotions.
I'm curious. When it comes to, like you said, if we physically strong, we go to a gym, and it's you can see it. You can, like, oh, that person bench pressed 300 pounds. Like, he is strong. We know how he got there by continually doing bench press and
exactly
proteins and good foods and all that.
That's a really good point.
But emotional strength, I've noticed there's a very fine line with that. How did you get there?
Mm-hmm.
Some of us, we've seen friends die, we've had family die, and first responders, we've seen bad call after bad call, and you just become kind of resilient. Are you emotionally strong? Are you lacking empathy?
So,
are you emotionally dead?
The one piece that you have to keep in consideration with all that is that as strong as you will become, you will always have a weakness, but you should never fear the weakness. Case in point, the recent events in Afghanistan, where we had the 13 service members that were killed. That hit me extremely hard because I know people that have served. I have served, and I have fought in combat. And I went home to visit my family here a couple weeks ago, and there's a military memorial that's in the little town we live in, and he built this memorial by himself. Like, it is immaculate, beautiful. You would think like the city paid for this kind of thing. He did it on his own because he's also a veteran. I just pulled over randomly one day after knowing what had happened. Side of the road, pulled over, and I just walked up. I knelt down, and I started praying. I broke down. I mean, it's hitting me now because it's real. The tears began to flow because the real question came in: did everything we served, was it for nothing? Because the same thing happened in Iraq differently. When we withdrew, Iraq fell, but we withdrew differently, right? And I remember just sitting there just crying as I was praying to this monument because I saw a war that I'd been a part of where people had died, and missions that I'd been a part of where I'd watched people die. And I got up and I saluted the monument. And as I was going on my truck, this random passerby pulled over. Had no clue who this woman was. She just wanted to say thank you for your service. And as she walked up, she could see the emotion was still raw. The tears were still flooding my eyes. And she started crying. So then I started crying. It just was like, well, if you're going to cry, I'm going to cry. And then within 10 seconds, she gave me a hug. And I didn't even know this woman's name. Hadn't even heard her voice yet. And she just gave me a hug. The point that I'm making is that we will be challenged no matter how strong we get because we are still humans. We still have emotions. And it is okay to let your emotions show. Because what I can promise you is when people see you being real and authentic, it is immeasurable with how much they begin to trust you. Because they know that no matter what, when life happens, not if, when life happens, they know that that guy right there, he's trustworthy. Or he has values or beliefs, a spiritual side to him that I've seen. And I'm going to go with him. Those are the people that I want to follow. And those are the people that I want to help build that don't know how to get to that. So to me, if you don't know it, and the point you mentioned a second ago with the practicing every day, that's how we get strong. That's why I drove 86 miles here to come do this, because I believe in it. I'm not interested, right? I'm invested.
Absolutely.
This is something that is not just what we do in seminars once a quarter, once a week, once a month. This is a daily practice of talking to people, engaging with people, acknowledging people, sharing some things you're going through, because the common shared suffering will bring about a level of trust and commitment that is only going to grow. And that's how we share that and build up everybody around us. It's like, think of it this way. If you throw in a calm body of water, what happens if you throw one rock in the middle of it.
You get ripples.
How far do those ripples go?
Not very far.
Well, do they? Think about it.
Well, I mean, not as much as you throw a whole bucket of rocks.
Well, no. Just think about it though. Like if this table right here for a size demonstration was the body of water, it was calm, and I dropped a rock as big as the top of this cap here, how far would the ripples go?
To the edge.
All
They
the way
would
to the edge.
touch every single edge, right? Some might be dirt. If this was like a pond, might be dirt, might be rock, might be a root. So the wave would impact them differently. It would have a different effect on how it hit. But all that matters is the wave touched it. It's like a seed being planted. When you engage in conversations with people, you're planting a seed. Seeds don't grow overnight. They don't grow in a week. But the more that you care for the seed, you water the seed, you nurture the seed, like when I'm learning in ecology right now, my 20-page dissertation, right? It will grow. But it doesn't stop when the shoot comes through the earth. You have to continue watering, continue nurturing, continue, because there will be weather, there will be storms that will threaten its life. You have to stay there with it. And that's where I believe people withdraw. It's too hard, takes too much time, takes too much work. I've got my own problems. I got to deal. You'd be surprised if your own problems turned into everybody's problems. And then imagine this. You got one person building the house versus 20. You're going to build a house a lot quicker. Because you all have the same problem. Build a house.
You know, and not only that, I think kind of when we talk about disconnecting with humans, we're of the like, oh, look, I got the shoot through the ground. Look, it's starting to grow. Let me take a picture, throw it on the Instagram, moving on. We've got the immediate instant gratification, like, oh, we made it grow. We didn't kill it. And then we just put it aside. We got what we want. We got the instant feeling of good.
Well, that's where
we don't invest and, watch our investment grow. We just see it right off the bat and we're good.
follow through.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
if
seeing things through
That's
to the end.
That's the word that summed up my 4 sentences right there.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we had this conversation with Chris yesterday about him using 150 words to make a 4-word statement and going all the way around the subject before he got back to
yeah,
it.
the whole point A, point B. It's like
Yeah.
it's like when you ask your kid a yes or no question because they know they're in trouble, so they do this with their answer, and you're like, no, I need the yes or no. Give me the direct line answer. Don't give me the 20 other no. Yes or no.
That's I feel when I watch like any White House press conference. Like, did this happen? Well, you have to understand our policies. I'm like, oh my God.
From a certain point of view.
But look at it from this. Like, how much do you trust somebody that doesn't answer the question?
Oh, you don't. Immediately, that's a shutdown.
If somebody just answers your question, you have closure, you have definition, you have reason, you have logic, you have everything you need because yes and no is answered. Those are definitive. That's like our relationships with people. If it's false, how's it going down the hall, you're not being definitive. You're leaving a lot of open-ended, just lack of connectedness.
That was something as bad as it sounds. Sometimes even the hard truths have to be said that way. Like,
have to be.
even when I, for example, like in EMS, when we work cardiac arrests and we pronounce somebody in the home, dead, deceased, expired.
Right.
It's not, they've passed on, they're asleep, dead, deceased, expired. Like, you may not like that finality, but you need that finality.
Right. It's
And
closure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was a hard episode today. It really was.
Well,
Do you wanna-
there's one last piece I wanted to share here as far as something that I think is unique, and it kind of follows this mantra, is there's a unique wanting to know and needing to know philosophy, right? And what I mean by that is there are a myriad of things in life that we need to know that we could care less that we want to know it. I don't need to know all the additional things that my car does and all the different maintenance requirements and what my house, no, I don't need to know any of that, right? But when it happens, when something wrong happens, now I need to know it because I got to fix it, right?
Mhm.
But do I really want to know it? No, I don't want to know all the extra stuff that goes on with my job because I just need to know these few pieces, right? The beautiful composition of needing to know and wanting to know is that symbiotic fusing. When what you want to know now becomes what you need to know, because that's where your learning is limitless. So it's like the whole thing of like, if you're in a job that you ask yourself at the end of the day, like, I get paid to do this? Like, that's where you're in an environment that you want to be in and you need to be in. You've married them together. And that's what's unique about service members answering a call, is because we feel like that's where we want to be and it's where we need to be. But that something happens, that something we talked about over time just filters away, right? Sometimes it's nothing more than going back to the basics of, why did you join here? Why did you step up and put that uniform on? What made you run in after so-and-so? What made you do this? And if it's a simple like, well, I just felt like it was the right thing to do. What made you feel that way? That's where you start chipping. And if it's a closed off conversation, then you can associate, well, this is something I dealt with. But that's also a dangerous way, because, there was it's hard for us to associate with experiences that we don't have experience in. And a good example I can give to that is there was a member of my wife's unit just here about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, both 21 years old. And they were expecting their first child here a couple months ago. And he was on shift work and anything, so she went to work, and he got a knock on the door later and said, "You need to come with me right now." It was a police officer. He said, I'm not going to lie to you. There was a car wreck, and your pregnant wife is dead. Imagine his feeling. Sorry, this is hard for me, because you can't connect to that. You can't, as a human, look at him and say, I know what you've been through. I can imagine how you feel. Those are tough. That is spiritual warfare at its worst. It's not the loss of life. It's the loss of life that wasn't even here yet. But the silver lining to this was, even though she had passed away from the car wreck, they saved the baby, and the baby lived. But how do you engage in a conversation with somebody like that? That's a tough one. And you can't come at and that's just one example. You can't come in a situation if you don't have the experience to say, oh, I can imagine what you're going through. Like we talked about earlier with Kevin Hart and Dwayne Johnson, right?
Yeah.
Like, what do you got to lose, right? Like, tell me, because they don't have the experience. Even if they did, they're not wearing the uniform now in the battle, right? But even in the worst of those situations, you're still a human. And sometimes all it takes is just being there with them, being there present with them, showing a sign of affection, not of affliction, providing them with, food, providing them with just a smile, the simple things in life that allow the natural grieving process to take place. Because there will be a myriad of instances in our entire life where we will engage in situations that we have no choice in, regardless. And if we turn the blind eye in days, tomorrow, next week, and next month, I'm not growing spiritually, I'm not growing stronger mentally, not if those situations happen, when they happen, how are we going to stand tall, not just for us, but for others? Because at the end of the day, life's not about us. I don't know about y'all, but when was the last time you saw a hearse pulling a U-Haul? Right? You ain't taking nothing with you when you leave this earth.
Well,
no.
Unless you're Larry the Cable Guy.
From like backwoods, redneck Louisiana, so he probably
Maybe
sees it kind of often. That's just how they get around down there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But
no.
You're
Never seen anybody buried in a trailer.
Well, even if they were, I mean, when you leave this earth, you're taking nothing with you, right? So we all want to have this legacy of a statue or being remembered and all these things, right? So why not do that? Why not actually connect with people to leave that legacy, to leave that footprint, to leave those seeds, right? To leave something of value, right? So it's something I've learned, that there's subjective value and objective value. You know, I can tell you right now that this bottle of water came from Mount Kilimanjaro from Tanzania, Africa, and was filtered through the rocks and cost me $27, you'd be like, dude, that thing says Price Chopper on it. That cost you 42 cents. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I can sit here and say, no, you don't understand. This is Mount Kilimanjaro water. It was just sold at Price Chopper, right? Cool, I'll give you $1. That's my final offer. You know what I mean? Like, that's subjective value.
Yeah.
Objective values are definitive truths in the spiritual side that we can all agree on. Like I can say, this is a wooden table, right? Or that's a palletized wall, or whatever the case. That's objective truth. There's things we can look at and go like, oh, yeah, that's true. There's no arguing it. So we have to connect with people objectively, not subjectively, and place our own values and opinions in things when they're really not even warranted.
Yeah.
So,
and that's something we do terribly in our careers. Like military, fire, EMS, like all of us, it's, man, that sucked. Well, let me tell you another war story. Like it's like a one-upper. Like it's
right.
We do it to ourselves. We just can't.
Mm-hmm.
We can't share in somebody else's experience. We got to tell them about ours because ours was worse, and you need to learn from mine. And
well, I think that's society at large. I don't think that's exclusive to just us.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of those things that I don't know if it's human nature, if it's whatever, but I think it's more common than it's not.
So I actually, when you guys were talking at the very beginning, when we were getting set up, I went over and took a note on my paper here because it was a topic I thought was interesting that I've heard before and I just didn't think to mention, but it's your trauma versus my trauma,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're all different. It's just like I mentioned earlier, you can give 20 people a camera with taking the photo, same photo, but then if you tell them to draw it, it's 20 different illustrations, right? So if you had a young lady or a young man who came into work one day and they were just wrecked because their dog died, you could subjectively look at it and be like, okay, dude, it's just a dog. Get over it. Do your job, right? Okay.
But I would say I totally understand because my dog died.
Right.
And I love dogs. So
right.
I feel your pain.
So, but that's my point, though. I mean,
yeah.
But think of it this way. Do you know why they were connected to the dog? Maybe it was because that dog was their grandfather's who just passed away, and they're connected to the dog because it's a memory of their grandfather who, oh, by the way, was the person who raised them because their mom and dad died in a car wreck 15 years. Like, you have no clue
right.
what their connection is to that, right? So for us to subjectively say why you shouldn't feel that way because you think they shouldn't be feeling that way, that's very subjective.
That's one of the biggest struggles in my line of work.
Exactly.
It's like your emergency versus my emergency.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why are we here at 2 a.m. for your tooth pain?
Right.
This is stupid. Well, this is the first time you've ever called 911 because this is maybe the first time you've ever experienced pain like this.
Right.
So it's the worst you've ever felt. So you should do what you were told to do as a child and call for help.
Right. And that falls in the lane of like preconceived notions. We have these preconceived ideas that if someone calls because of tooth pain, like in your line of work, right? Well, that's not an emergency, right? But maybe they never had that before. It was their first time ever calling.
Well, and we talk about perspective a lot. And that's the thing, is being able to look at stuff from other people's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I mean, you're going to filter it through your lens of experience.
Right.
But being able to step outside of yourself, I think it just makes you more effective at your job, and it makes you more resilient because those 2 a.m. tooth pain calls don't aggravate you quite so much.
Right. You know, and something else I've learned from and something else I've learned from a spiritual religious standpoint, from God's perspective, is, have you ever been stuck at a train or stuck at a light or stuck somewhere and you're trying to get somewhere? And
no, that's never happened
right?
to me, Ray.
Never.
Never.
You've always had green lights everywhere you've gone, right?
Absolutely.
Right. So we get stuck in places, right? I heard the testimony of a young lady who was meeting her mom at a TJ Maxx one time. And they both were delayed getting there by 10, 15 minutes, right? And, they were eager because it was a small opportunity of time, small window of time for them to spend time with each other. So they really wanted that time. So they really wanted to get there, and they were frustrated. But when they arrived and they were literally just cordoning the TJ Maxx off because there was a fatal shooting in the TJ Maxx. Had they been there 15 minutes earlier, they may have been involved in a fatal shooting, right? So that story prompted me to start thinking from the perspective of whenever we get stopped somewhere, whenever we get called somewhere, whenever we get anything in life that really challenges us in a frustrating way, like, why am I doing this? I look at it from one perspective of, well, maybe it's because God's stopping me here because he's preventing something from happening to me. Or maybe it's because I'm meant to cross paths with this individual. And had I not been stopped here, I never would have talked to them. Testimony to that was that motorcycle I drove in tonight to drive here. Mm-hmm. About a month ago, I drove that bike back for the first time from here to Kansas. And when I got in Kansas, and this is taking I-35, so 75, 80 mile per hour traffic, I get to Kansas, I parked the bike, didn't touch it again until Sunday going home. And the bike felt funny. So I get off and I check it. There was a chunk of rubber about the size of a baseball missing down to the cords. Now think about this from perspective. I'm on a motorcycle doing 80 miles an hour, and it could have happened a block from my house. It could have happened 100 miles from my house. But I made it all the way there with nothing happening until I get on it to go home, and it's flat. And I looked at it from the perspective, or I could have been like, I'm going to be late to work. I'm going to be late for duty. I'm going to get home. Like all these things that are frustrating. What happened from that is I got more time with my family that I wouldn't have gotten. A brother that I hadn't seen in months dropped everything and drove up from Oklahoma, dropped everything with a trailer and came to get me, and then drove me from Oklahoma, from Wichita, Kansas, back to Missouri, got back at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then I was at work the next day, and they went back home. But I got time with my family. I got time with my wife, whereas I could have viewed it as like, oh, I got maintenance problems, and I got bills to pay now, and I'm going to be late. Like, perspective. How you look at something, like anything, like Amazon. You could literally talk yourself out of buying anything on Amazon if you just go to the reviews and start looking at the 1 stars. Everything's going to have a 1-star review, and if you're looking for it, you'll convince yourself of why you shouldn't do it.
That's brings us all the way back to confirmation bias. What you're looking for is what you're going to find.
Exactly.
You know, if you are looking for problems, you're going to find them. Mm-hmm. If you're looking for solutions, you're going to find them.
So if you're looking for a way to get mentally strong, you're going to find it.
Yeah.
Guaranteed. So that's what this path in life has taught me, is I've been looking for it and I'm finding it, and I'm finding it in ways that has ultimately showed me on the spiritual battlefield, we all are involved in that fight together. Every one of us. Doesn't matter if you're a firefighter, EMS, manager at the Lowe's hardware store. We're all involved in it because we all have suffering. We all have human emotions.
Well, I can't think of a better way to end it.
There you go.
Dude, thanks so much for making the long journey.
My pleasure.
So
absolutely.
We appreciate it.
I need a long break before you come back. That was rough.
Well, like we end every episode, if you are having a problem, there are resources out there. Reach out. If you know somebody that's having a problem, don't be afraid to talk to them. Step up to the plate. Let them know that you care and that there are resources out there. So take care of yourself, and we'll see you soon.
God bless.